Okay, now I'd like to introduce Steve Sherrill to find out what do you want to talk about. So, Steve, what do you want to talk about?
Well, just got back from Steve Benninger's house. Um, Tonight we're going to talk about model railroading history, but a little bit from a different angle. Most of us have heard of John Allen, George Sellios, McClanahan, Zane, Frank Ellison. But what about our model railroading history? What made us become model railroaders? Why did we want to start a layout? My own situation was I had American Fire in 47. That's 1947 for you young kids. By 52, I had gotten my first HO set of Arnie, and I had a little bit of experience viewing HO trains from neighbors who were in the military. Some of them were quite talented. I saw some Barney docksides, things like that. But also at the time I was growing up, there was an O-scale layout in Union Station in Washington, D.C. I don't know how many of you ever visited that layout or knew anything about it. So about 52, I started in HO, and I was quite satisfied for a while running around in a circle, but then I said, got any something more than this. So my sister was an artist, and we lived in a Cape Cod house. So she painted a backdrop. She was quite good. Painted a backdrop on my 4x8 sheet of plywood. And so I was off and running now. So I started looking for natural things that I could put on the railroad. You know, in the early days, there wasn't ground foam that you could go to the store and buy. You had to come up with this kind of stuff. Used to go to a florist shop, and we came up with something called vermiculite. And vermiculite was a kind of a filler that you put into a base or a planter, and it held the water. Well, if you put that around your track, boy, it looked really good, but your trains couldn't run at all. You know, it just clogged them up. And I remember the first time that I made a reverse loop work. I was really satisfied, you know. And there was a lot of things that you learned just by doing. Made many mistakes. Had a lot of cars, but I was always afraid of that $3.50 Craftsman kit. You know, the one that had the block on the ends, and you had to put the embossed sides on, and you know, they looked like they were really hard, and they were also $3.95. So I got to where I could make those, and I made some of the Craftsman structures, and so I got to where I was pretty good at it. And so I went to various scales, HO, and then I tried N, and then I tried HO and 30. I had a decent little layout on that. Then I never really got into O scale. I got into O and 30 late. Not late, but you know, about 87 or 8, something like that. And that's where I've been for a while. I had G scale for a while too. And it looks like I'm going to get back into it to some degree, but from a different standpoint. And I hope to share that with you a little later on in some of the segments. But I've been pretty successful with my layout. It's been in 7 magazine articles. And one time it was on a couple of covers that I don't even remember. I actually really turned a well-known magazine down because of a personal conflict. But you know, and I never thought that of my layout being any better than anybody else's or as good, or, you know, that just wasn't the point. It was always about the camaraderie and building the layout. One of the things I have noticed lately is we're getting a lot of historical information on John Allen again. He's coming back up. I always wondered, what would John Allen's layout look like now? And how would his layout compare to some of the very fine layouts that are here today? And so I always think that today's layouts have much improved over the people whose layouts I've named previously, other than Celios, Zane. You know, those guys are just overwhelming. We have a lot of good modelers on this Zoom. And I just am fascinated by some of the work that they do. Does anybody else have anything they want to share about their history in model railroading? We all must have some kind of a story that we can share. You know, the first real good layout that you ever visited, you know, what made that stand out over something that you had seen prior to that? We all have favorite layouts, things that we like to see on layouts. I used to never see water. Water used to never be modeled because nobody could do water right, and what they were using, it smelled so bad that they got, you know, some feedback from other people in the family. So, you know, I always tried to put a little bit of water, a couple of bridges to cover the basics. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about tonight, with just, you know, each person has their own history in model railroading, and it's very important to them, you know, what that meant to their development as far as their skill levels. You know, if you can remember using DC, straight DC, and the block problems, control was very, very limited. When DCC came out, it changed everything. And now we have batteries, so we don't even have to clean the track. We have a lot of ready to run stuff off the shelf, which enables us to move along in constructing our layouts. We're very fortunate that communication systems are much better now, the Zooms, the YouTubes, the train meets, the train shows. These are things that we can all meet other modelers. So I mean, I'm fascinated by the international modelers that we have on this Zoom right here. These guys are top notch, and you know, I love hearing from them and seeing their work. So, does anybody else have anything that, you know, that they want to share as far as their? Yeah,
Steve, it's Greg. Something that you started me thinking about when you were mentioning all of the, I'd almost call some of them founding fathers of model railroading. And I think one of the reasons we all are so familiar with so many of those names was the model railroad publications that came out at the time. You know, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have YouTube. All we had were magazines to read, and if we were lucky, a convention to go to where we might be able to actually meet one of them or see one of them. And so you had sort of this, these historical figures that did great modeling and really were innovators of their time, and we were able to read about them. I think what's happening now is you don't have as centralized a place to go and find all of the best of what's happening in model railroading right now, like the magazines you had back then. You have the internet, you have YouTube, you have Zoom meetings, you have more in-person contacts, and there's a lot of just as good modeling going on now we may not all be exposed to it the same way, to where we all still have the commonality of these are the great modelers of the time.
Yeah, I know, but you're absolutely correct. But each one of those people put out some kind of a booklet. You know, it was soft book, back book, and they tell us about their layouts, how they did certain techniques, and it was really fascinating. I mean, you know, you could read those things for hours. And Atlas put out little layout books, and then they had bigger layout books for guys that wanted to go a little bit further. We just don't seem to have those in that form. You know, we can go to YouTube and find out anything we want. We go on the computer. It's such a help.
I'd say it's almost the same as what happened to music in the last 50, 60 years. You had a couple basic formats and everybody fit into one or the other, and you had your stars. Now there are so many different forms of music that it's harder to find somebody who really stands out in that area. And I think it's the same thing. So much has become specialized and so much has become segmented, and some of it is because of the internet and the availability of so many different facets of ways of finding out about modelers, what they're doing. I know on YouTube, some of the people that I communicate with, there are a couple great modelers on YouTube. There's Luke Cowan in Australia. There's Jason Jensen. And these are some of the greatest modelers of today. They're doing innovating things, but they're publishing stuff in a different way than we used to get stuff. And some people find them and some people don't, as opposed to everybody gets the same magazine, so they all see the same article by the same modeler.
Mm-hmm. Well, you and I shared something in common that, you know, I was at the Model Railroad Club in the beginning, and now you're still there.
Yeah, same club that's gone through a couple different different changes, but it's still the same basic club. I don't remember when. In the 50s. Yeah, it was in the 50s, because it was in not the Gazette, Montgomery County Sentinel. The guy advertised for people who wanted to start a Model Railroad Club. And that I think it was 13 then. So whatever that, 56, 55. You know, and oh my God, a Model Railroad Club. Well, you run down there and there was 5 people, and you know, so that was a start. Didn't stay there long, because then, you know, a young man came around. But
well, you guys are all you're both making really good points. And I mean, I was born in 1984. So I mean, I'm relatively young, but I mean, I remember, you know, meeting my first girlfriend because we both sat in a car listening to the radio for 4 hours trying to hear that one song.
Yeah.
That now, you know, you don't meet people anymore that fashion because, oh, just pull it up on YouTube or something. Kind of like the point you're making, Greg. But at the same time, you know, it is more readily available, but you don't have those conventions. I remember the first train show that I ever went to when I think I was 6, and it absolutely blew my mind. I mean, it blew my mind. Granted, I was 6, but I mean, you know, it blew my mind, and I always wanted to go to the periodical aisle and try to see the new Model Railroader magazine or something. Whereas I feel like if I was like my kids, I can't get my kids into it because I'll show them a YouTube video or something, and they're like, I'm just going to go back to my YouTube video. So it's just difficult these days, it seems like, to do that because they're saturated with it, you know, all the time. And there's not that, I don't know how to word it, but I mean, I'm basically agreeing with you guys. And
well, you know, Doc, something that you mentioned that I think may be part of the reason there used to have to be a certain amount of patience when you couldn't look up something right away, when you couldn't pull up
Yes,
a song
exactly.
right away, you had to
Exactly.
wait for it. And we had to wait for stuff to come out in the magazines, or we had to wait until we could go to that annual convention to see something. And now everything is on demand. You can pull up the music we want to see. You can pull up the video that you want to see. But if it's too long, you get impatient. You want to move on. And, I think the younger people are, the more that's just their common way of operating.
I think Jim Kellogg, with his modeling lifestyle, is showcasing a lot of great modelers today. Jim, you're still doing those, I assume? Yeah.
I've got one more coming up that I'm going to do in October on the regular Wednesday show. It's the first time I've tried to do one on the regular Wednesday show. Frankly, I stopped doing them on the Thursday night because I had people that just felt it was too much of their time. They just did not want to do it. They just, when it came down to taking the time to picking 3 friends and asking them to join them on the show, picking 25 different photos of their modeling and that kind of stuff that goes back in time, talking about some of their history in the hobby. It seemed like it was just too much trouble for them. And so they would, just very politely say, we're sorry, we just can't do it.
I just thought they were. I thought
I don't know how.
And so I just I figured, if that's the feeling out there, for whatever reason, whether it's because they have Facebook pages and they post everything, the minute that it's finished on their own Facebook, and they think that's good enough, that gives them the history that they want, then that's fine. But I figured out that that's probably why no one had tried to do that before. I thought it was a great idea because I had always wanted to be able to go back and see some of the real greats of the past, not just read about them, but actually see them and hear what they sounded like and what their mannerisms were, how their friends reacted to them. And that's why I started it in the first place. But I'm afraid that people just aren't interested in doing it. It's just too much trouble for them.
I mean, if we could get like Howard Zane or Jason Jensen, or you got Al Judy. He's one of the anchors in our scale, and I just thought they were absolutely fascinating for the reasons you just said. I mean, it's like a snapshot of documentation. I don't know. I loved them.
I'm not going to promise it, but I might do Howard.
I did Bob Brown, and it was I thought it was really an exciting thing. And some of the people that we did, I was really excited about doing them. But then I started.
Maybe we need.
Go ahead.
Well, I think we should put more layouts and show layouts and the new tracks. That's my feeling.
Layout feature.
Show off some of these.
I got no problem.
I know that well, I'm just saying that I know sometimes it's hard to photograph one's layout. To move around the camera, we get a little shaky, that kind of thing, and I know even from my own experience, there's a certain amount of nerves. Really in front of people, just on your camera, you're talking into a machine here. It's much easier to somebody in person, I think. But I think that like Steve Bidding and I, we worked on that little show that we're doing. We also have something else we're working on for NG scale.
Right.
As a building, from a building standpoint, that we're going to take some and show off.
You know, and
Um,
Steve, I agree with what you're saying. I'd love to be able to show more segments about layouts. We can't even get people to send us in, snapshots or short videos of their layouts that we can run on the caboose segment. So it's not a question of not wanting to do it.
That's another layout, I don't even know what size. I mean, we've got some really, really good modelers here.
No
And
question
some great
about it.
layouts, we're going to say, well, I knew Jim, but I just couldn't get to his layout, never saw it,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And that's not what now we're not going to all get Florida to see your layout, but we certainly could see, a video of it, or visit it. And if you don't want to show the whole thing, show us what you want to show us. Same with Greg.
There's a lot
Same
of
with your layout.
but does a lot of that come back to what's happening to the new generation also happening to us? That's the reason we don't have the time right now, because we can just go do whatever we really want to do and
Yep.
see whatever we really, really want to see.
I think that's part of it. And you think about this. When I started these Zoom shows 4 years ago, that's not a long time ago. 4 years. I've been doing this once a week. When I first started out, people, when we would send a link out for the Zoom, people couldn't figure out how to hit the link to get on the Zoom show.
Yeah.
Well, now we don't have that problem because Zoom is an accepted method of communication. YouTube now, 4 years ago when you said, do you have a YouTube channel? I had no idea what people were talking about, and I doubt most of you did. Now YouTube channel is no big deal. I think that we've come that far in 4 years.
It's certainly a way to
And you talk about the magazines, look at your local newspapers. How many of those are what they used to be? We've reached a point
we don't even have one.
We've reached a point in my county.
Yeah, they're non-existent.
That, I used to love to get up in the morning and read the newspaper with a cup of coffee. I can't do that anymore. Well, if the newspapers are finding that they're having to go digital, how many of the print magazines do you think are going to be in the same position?
But Jim, do you prefer having it digital?
No, I don't, but I don't have a choice.
So that's an interesting point, because that's what you grew up with. But my kids are not gonna walk out to the mailbox and get the newspaper to see what's going on. They would say that's something crazy you did when you were young, Dad. So there's that.
You're exactly right, and see, they can't. I'm not the market anymore. It's the kids that are the market, and they want everything digital, and they want it now, right this minute. They don't want to see it in 2 hours off the press. They want to see it now.
Yeah, and immediately.
Exactly. And they want to see it built immediately, and they want to see it operate immediately. And taking years to build a model railroad? No, it takes too long to do that.
Well, I think that there's definitely a place for the ready-to-run guy. I think that the ready-to-run guy could be an answer that we're overlooking, because he's not going to be ready to run always. Satisfied. He'll then try to make either with a 3D printer, some kind of a laser, or maybe he'll scratch build something. The ready-to-run guy is still a model railroader. He's in it. He's approaching it a completely different way. I'm sure.
I totally agree with you, Steve. And it's not just the ready to run guy. I feel the same way about American Flyer guys, about Lion-O guys that run 3-rail trains. I've seen some absolutely gorgeous model railroads that are 3-rail or that are American Flyer. But the people have the scenery that they built, the scenes they created on those railroads, they're equal to anything that I've seen in scale. So it's not just the ready to run. I totally agree with you. I think there's a place for everybody. But I do think the one thing that the reason for new tracks is more modelers building more models. And if we don't keep modeling in the hobby, that's where I think we lose the hobby. Whether it's 3D printing, however you do the modeling, if we lose modeling in model railroading, then I think we've lost the hobby. That's just my opinion.
Well, you're talking about the modeling from a scratch building standpoint.
Or kit building, or 3D printing, or however you do it. But if you're not building something with your hands somehow, I think that loses the hobby.
Well, I mean, there's still, I had this kind of internal struggle the other night when I was talking about 3D printing with another guy. And I was like, gosh, I'm friends with so many scratch builders and they're so talented. And he turned to me and he said, do you know how much work goes into the computer-aided drafting that I do? He was like, you try doing that. That's a hobby within your hobby now.
Right.
And I was like, okay.
I've heard people say that. And I've also heard people say, well, give it a year or so and AI will solve that problem. You won't have to do the CAD program anymore. You'll just you'll have to learn how to communicate to AI. AI will take care of that for you.
Well, AI is going to destroy everything, but
I know when I do look at the YouTubes from the modelers in Europe, man, they appear to be going strong. I mean, really strong. And I don't know what. No, I think the inspiration for them is when they took steam off of the railroad, communities got together and kept those little valley lines running. They rebuilt all that, and it's attractive, and it keeps that type of thing in people's minds. Now they want to have a duplicate of whatever train they see. People see diesels running now. There's really nothing going on there other than long trains. But these people who are now a part of rebuilding, redoing, like the EBT, that's going to bring a lot of people back. But in Europe, in England especially, where they have just taken these little valley lines that ran all over, and when they took them off and shut them down, they said, no, you're not pulling up those rails. We want the engines. We'll refurbish them and put them back online. And a lot of these people spent their own money to get this. And, if you go on YouTube, you can see a lot of these things, and they have done fantastic jobs on that. Whereas,
they do a lot more cardstock buildings than we do, that I've noticed anyway, because I'm really interested in cardstock and paper buildings. They do a lot of that over there, and they make it look amazing. I mean, if you had John Garrity, do they have a lot of rebuilds on engines over where you are? John, he must not be there. I see if he's up though.
No, I just unmuted. What was the question again? I was trying to find some.
Are they rebuilding of engines over where you are?
Model engines or full size ones?
Real
No,
thing.
Not at present. Loco, we used to, but locos are now being imported from basically Canada. Previously, we were building up to the equivalent of your AC 4400s and the EMD equivalents here. But we run on a hell of a lot lighter rails than you guys do. Your axle loads are up to 35 tons.
Yeah.
Ours max out at round about 30 tons max. with most of the network being way, way down on that. I mean, 25 tonne or less. In some cases, if you get out on the branch lines, it's an 18 tonne axle load. So if you've got a six axle diesel, 18 tonnes by 6 axles gives you, what, 72 tonne all up for a locomotive? And that's a 950 horsepower locomotive. Our 6 axles 4400s weigh in at about 130 tonne max. How much is your AC 4400s weigh in? I bet they go closer to 180 tonne rather than 130.
But have your communities, do they have any little narrow gauge lines that they've refurbished the engines and got them running?
Yep. You want a video?
Oh, hey, I've seen a lot of. That's
How
what I'm
about,
talking.
how about a contribution for your next buffer stop?
Yeah,
Off my YouTube channel.
but what I'm saying is, we don't have that here.
Yeah, Steve, I think there's no question that Europe has a much greater appreciation for history than either the States or Australia or many other parts of the world do. You can see that in everything from their old British shows that are constantly going back to Victorian times or earlier times. The way that they preserve a lot of the old buildings and stuff all around Europe. I think because their history goes back further, they appreciate it more, and that translates into saving more of it when it goes out of favor or goes out of use, such as short lines and stuff like that. And that probably translates into modeling that history more than we do here as well.
Okay.
Well, they've got a lot. I think they've got a greater commuter rail service in Europe as well, which puts more people in trains and viewing scenery from a train as well. Like, over here in America, I never rode on a train once growing up until I went to Europe, ever once.
Okay. Would you believe currently the UK has more operational steam locos in heritage service than British Railways had when they pulled steam in the mid-1960s? I kid you not.
Whoa.
That's a good statistic, John.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Is it tourism?
Yep. You can go from, I did a tour in 2018. I went to Statfold Barn for one of their enthusiast days.
That's what I figured.
I happened to be in the right place at the right time. On that particular day, they had 18 narrow gauge locomotives in steam on the one site. Yes, I've got photos to back it up.
Hey,
I think I rode behind 3 of them that day.
There's a steam engine being built right now. It's called the T1.
Yep.
Yeah.
God, where is that?
Right there. That show up on the screen?
Oh,
Where's
yes.
that?
That's a T1, Pennsylvania T1. There's a society that's building this.
Water boiler?
That's the boiler.
Yeah, it's a brand new engine though, isn't it?
Yes, it is. They're building it. I forgot when they want to, I forgot when they want to have this thing fired up. But,
Wow.
so don't say that they're not building any steam engines over here.
Oh, no, in the United States, you got an awful lot of rebuilds. Colorado, they just one after another in the last 15, 20 years, the number of steam engines that are now back running. When somebody was talking about Britain and all those narrow gauge, or not narrow gauge, but the little branch lines, and when they closed them down, the people took them over. Well, they did the right thing. They got the right of ways, and they got a lot of volunteers that are restoring the equipment and the steam engines, and they're smaller steam engines. That's the other thing, is to the advantage. I've seen a shop where they were rebuilding 3 steam engines at one time, and it's like a custom body shop where they're building hot rods or something like that, where they have them on dollies, and they're that small they could push them around out of the way and bring another one in, and or work on several at the same time. But the thing is, once they get them built, they got a railroad to run them on. Here in Canada, that's where we went south. We had some steam engines running back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, but then the two major big railroads, they wanted, because of insurance and everything else and just the liability, they wouldn't allow them then to run on the railroads, and a lot of them didn't have their own trackage anymore, owning it. And that stymied, I think, the steam rail fanning here in Canada. And we just don't have the resources, as much money as the United States does. And, like that big engine, the T1, and you got the big boy up and going. Of course, you had a major railroad that funded that, but still.
Wow.
Up until recently, there were two widely separated geographic railways one's on Tasmania, one's in Victoria. The Victorian one still runs daily steam with at least probably 2 to 3 locomotives, steam locos. The Tasmanian one at present's down for heavy maintenance, but when they are fully up and back, not only does it run daily steam from Queenstown to the top of the hill at a place called Double Barrel, it's a rack railway, aka cog railway.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
They're the two that runs daily steam in Australia. A lot of the other, the one in Victoria, prior to COVID, was doing something like 350,000 visitors annually.
Whoa.
Behind steam.
Mm-hmm.
It can be done.
Steve, I can't thank you enough for starting this conversation tonight, but I think it's time to kind of close this off, and you all can stay if you want to after the show, but I think we need to give Phil a break and kind of close it down. So Steve, thanks so very much for doing your What Do You Want to Talk About, and for everybody's contributions. I think it's been a great discussion, and I hope we can do more of these in the future.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
No problem at all.